Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to untangle something that honestly feels like a massive, impenetrable web sometimes, the criminal justice system. We're going to dive right into the chronological journey of a case through the system in England and Wales. We'll look at the specific roles and powers of the key agencies involved and figure out exactly how a suspect moves from the initial scene of a crime all the way through to sentencing and beyond. Here's our roadmap for today. We have 5 main sections. 1, the frontline police roles. 2, the decision makers, CPS. 3, where justice happens, courts. 4, life after sentencing. And finally 5, a connected justice system. We are literally going from the initial sirens on the streets all the way to the heavy bars of the penitentiary. Let's jump in. Section 1, the frontline police roles. Enforcing the law and investigating crimes. We start our journey right on the front line with the police, who are the initial touchpoint for almost every single criminal case. Now, they actually have a really fascinating dual role. Obviously, they enforce the criminal law, investigate crimes, collate evidence, and arrest suspects. That's the dramatic side we all know, racing to scenes with the sirens blaring. But they also kind of act as judge and jury for minor infractions. For smaller offenses, police can directly issue formal punishments right there on the spot, like cautions or fixed penalty notices, which are basically just fines. But wait, what happens when the crime isn't minor? Once the police arrest and detain a suspect for a serious case and they collect all that crucial evidence, we hit this major handoff point. It really begs the question, who actually decides to prosecute once the police have collated the evidence? Do the police just march them straight into a courtroom? Well, the answer lies in Section 2, the decision makers. CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service. Here's the absolutely crucial point. The police gather the evidence, but they don't make the final call on prosecuting serious offenses. The CPS is a totally independent agency that steps in to advise the police early on. The police hand over their files, and the CPS provides the evidence for the prosecution and decides if there's enough there to actually charge someone. In fact, police have to charge offenders strictly in line with CPS instructions. Think of the CPS as the folks who actually tighten the handcuffs. If they decide to drop it, the suspect walks. The cuffs only stay on for court if the CPS gives the green light. And with that green light, we enter Section 3, where justice happens. Courts. Magistrates versus Crown Courts. This is where the arguments are made, and the verdict is decided. So, the court system is actually split in 2. First, you have the Magistrates Court. This is the absolute workhorse of the system. Literally all cases start here, and an incredible 95% are completed right here. They decide on pretrial issues like bail, and they handle sentencing for guilty pleas. But what if the required sentence is just too heavy for the magistrates? Or what if someone pleads not guilty to a serious crime? That's when the case escalates to the Crown Court, which conducts the big trials with a judge and jury. This is where the gavel ultimately comes down with the heaviest weight. If there is a guilty verdict, the judge has to dish out a punishment. There are 4 formal methods they can use. The most severe is a custodial sentence, meaning immediate imprisonment. Then you have community sentences, which might be something like unpaid work. They could also just issue a financial fine. Or, lastly, a conditional or absolute discharge. That basically means, yes, you're technically guilty, but we aren't enforcing any further punishment unless you reoffend. The gavel has dropped and the sentence is given. Welcome to Section 4, Life After Sentencing, HM Prison and Probation Service. The prison service manages life behind those heavy steel bars, carrying out the custodial sentences imposed by the court. But their job actually starts way earlier. They supervise offenders who are refused bail and remanded into custody before the trial even happens. And even after a conviction, prisons actively facilitate justice by arranging visits from defense lawyers and setting up ongoing police interviews. But what about the folks who don't end up behind bars? That's where the National Probation Service steps in. Think of them as the court's eyes and ears out in the community. Before a judge even decides on a punishment, the probation service produces vital pre-sentencing reports on the offenders to guide that decision. After sentencing, they're the ones supervising those community sentences we mentioned and overseeing strict requirements like court-ordered drug testing. Which brings us to our final stop, Section 5, a connected justice system, how the agencies work together. We've walked through this chronologically, but you have to realize these agencies absolutely do not operate in isolated silos. It's a massive, interwoven conveyor belt of justice with constant handoffs. The police work directly with the courts by giving evidence as witnesses and transporting defendants. They also aid prisons and probation by arresting individuals who breach the terms of their license. prisons hook right back into the courts by arranging video recordings and live links for giving evidence. And the CPS? They stay involved with the courts long after the trial, preparing appeals if a sentence feels unduly lenient.
And that leaves us with a pretty provocative final thought for this explainer. We've seen how evidence flows from the police to the strict charging parameters of the CPS, into the dual-layered court system, and finally to the supervision of prison and probation. In a system so deeply intertwined, from the street siren to the prison bars, what happens to society if even a single link in that chain breaks down? If the police fail to collect evidence legally, or the CPS is under-resourced, or the prisons are overcrowded, can true justice ever actually be served? It's absolutely something to keep in mind the next time you read a headline about the justice system. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep asking those tough questions.